This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining the meeting. Here, I can turn my camera on too. Okay, there we go. And so the first is the call to order and introductions. Do we want to go around and do our introductions? My name is Tally. I will be filling in for Jen until she gets here. And I live in Napa. I'm a member of the Citizen Action Committees for the Comprehensive Plan. Let's see. Cheryl, do you want to go next?
Cheryl Johnson, out here in Brownsmead since '76, and I am the liaison from our Northeast County group to the county-wide CAC.
Gail, you're next in my line of view.
Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director.
Okay, and Kelly?
I'm Kelly Huckestein, and I'm on the Citizen Advisory Committee as well.
And we have a guest here. Is it J.A.? Is that you?
It's Jed, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Jed Arnold. I'm the stewardship coordinator for Hampton Lumber, and we own most of the Big Creek watershed.
Great. Welcome. And we just got another guest. Do you want to introduce yourself? JD.
Hi, I'm Julia Decker.
Great. Well, welcome. So do we want to, we can do a review of the meeting summary. I wasn't at that meeting, so I would like someone else to do that. If Cheryl or Gail.
Yeah, actually, I haven't completed the meeting summary yet, so it'll be in next month's packet. I just ran out of hours in the day to complete things, so I apologize for that.
No problem. Okay, so do we have any public comment or input at this point? I don't know if that would be comment on the summary that we didn't get, so maybe that we can skip that part. Or any other comment? Okay, I hear no comment, so we can move on to the review of Goal 5 topics, which are wildlife habitat resources. And Gail, do you want to do that? Or do any of the other members?
Yeah, so basically Julia Decker, who's our planning manager, may or may not be a relationship to the Julia Decker who's on the phone today, but she put together a very good memo that talks about fish and wildlife habitat and basically the two main state agencies that are responsible for overseeing the regulations that help provide and create and protect wildlife habitat. And those two state departments would be Department of Forestry and Department of Fish and Wildlife. And in her memo, Julia lays out a lot of the different OARs, Oregon Administrative Rules, that cover wildlife habitat. And specifically, you can see that there's a section that talks or regulates and deals with Jewel Meadows Wildlife Area, areas in the code that will deal with marine reserves and protected habitat, about dealing with elk, dealing with sport angling. So there's a lot of information out there, a lot of regulation, layers of regulation, and different groups that are responsible for overseeing and protecting wildlife habitat. So it's more than just a county role. There's a lot of state regulation and oversight in the process. So what we did, Julia put a lot of background material in here. which I'm not going to go into extreme detail on, or any detail, because I'm assuming everybody has read it. But what we need to focus on today are, like we did last week, last month, the 3 tables that we worked on. I would like to do the same type of format where we pull policies that we've identified for further discussion or for questions. We'll pull those out and talk about them separately. Everything else that remains, if we could just go ahead in a single motion and approve anything that's not pulled. So we'll work through table 1 that way first. Then we will go down to table 2, which contains wildlife policies specific to the Northeast Community Plan. Again, using that same format of pulling any specific policies that we want to have further discussion on, and otherwise approving the rest with a recommendation. And then as we get towards the end of the meeting, to take some time, and hopefully the majority of our time, to identify the issues that we would foresee going ahead over the next 20 years, to identify what those issues are. We don't need to necessarily draft policy language tonight, but to identify what the concerns are, and what we would like to see happen as a result of a policy. So we've put together some sample ones here that we'll get to when we get to table 3. But really right now, I'd just like to go back and start with table 1 and to see if there's any policies specifically that you would like to pull before we go ahead and approve the remainder.
Talia, I would like to pull and discuss policy 3, policy 4, and policy 12.
Okay, great.
All right.
Yeah, can you scroll down to where we can all see policy 3?
Okay, Kelly or Tally, did you have specific policies that you wanted to pull for discussion?
I don't. Do you, Kelly?
No, I think that Cheryl got any of the ones that I was looking at, I think. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my long list.
Okay, so we'll start with so policy 3. And so since you pulled this one out, Cheryl, do you want to talk about what about it you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, and maybe a nice starting place, Talia, if you want to go ahead and just read us policy 3.
Sure. Absolutely. The county shall rely on strict enforcement of the Oregon Forest Practices Act to protect riparian vegetation along Class 1 streams and lakes and Class 2 streams affecting Class 1 streams for potential adverse effects of forest practices.
Okay. I did a lot of thinking and scribbling and writing on this. So I have some language drafted. So I have some ideas to suggest. And I sort of divided it into 2 sections. So the first one is technically findings, but it's sort of philosophy or overview. And then the second part, would be a drafting of the policy. And it's a wee bit long. And maybe if you want me to just read through the whole thing first, and then we would go back and I would read it more slowly and Gail can type it out for us.
Sure, that sounds great.
Gail, does that make sense to you?
Yep, that works, Cheryl.
Okay. So under the sort of big picture stuff, what I wrote was Clatsop County recognizes the importance of riparian vegetation in protecting fish and wildlife habitat resources. Vegetated riparian areas are vital to water quality functions, including the following, and then there are 5 things listed here. Number 1 is providing shade to maintain or reduce stream temperatures to meet state water quality standards. Number 2 is support wildlife in the stream corridors. Number 3 is minimizing erosion, nutrient, and pollutant loading into water. Number 4 is maintaining natural hydrology. 5 is stabilizing the slopes to prevent landslides that contribute to sediment of water. And then Clatsop County strongly encourages the protection of riparian vegetation to the greatest extent feasible from the impact of development, consistent with the best available ecological science. So that's sort of part 1, that's sort of the big picture thing. And then potential policy, this is sort of a merging of the one as written with some other parts added. The county shall support and promote enforcement of current riparian vegetation and stream protection standards in the Oregon Forest Practices Act to protect riparian vegetation along Class 1 streams and lakes and Class 2 streams and affecting Class 1 streams. And then the county shall seek changes to the Forest Practices Act when necessary to better protect riparian vegetation and water quality. So that's my two sections. Those are my suggestions. Gail, do you want me to read it to you slowly now so you can type it in for us?
Yeah, so let me ask a question, Cheryl. Your big overview, are you looking at that as a sort of an overarching goal, or is it something that you want to include as a separate, just a policy?
Good question. I don't have strong feelings on that. It does sort of drift into that goal category, which I always like to do. Do you have a recommendation?
I think it's completely up to all of you on the committee. I have no recommendation.
I think it sounds more goal-like to me for the most part, as it like touches on a lot of these policies. So I would say that would be my opinion.
Okay. All right, Cheryl, you want to go ahead and read it, please?
Yes. Clatsop County recognizes. Where are you?
I'll fix the spelling.
Yeah, that's okay. The importance of riparian vegetation in protecting fish and wildlife habitat resources. Vegetated riparian areas are vital to water quality function, including the following.
I am Essie.
Number 1, providing shade to maintain. Providing shade to maintain or reduce stream temperatures to meet state quality water standards. State quality standards. Yeah, state water standards. Okay.
Water quality, or
let's see, to meet state water quality standards.
okay.
Number 2, supporting wildlife in the stream corridors. Number 3, minimizing erosion, nutrient, and pollutant loading into water. Number 4, maintaining natural hydrology. Number 5, stabilizing slopes to prevent landslides that contribute to sedimentation of water. Clatsop County strongly encourages the protection of riparian vegetation to the greatest extent feasible from the impacts of development consistent with the best available ecological science. And that's the end of the big picture overview thing. Okay, policy. So again, this is a sort of a merging of the other one. So the county shall, and I don't know if you want to edit the old one, Gail, or just start from scratch with a new one.
Yeah, let's edit the old one. It's a good idea. Okay.
The county shall omit, rely on strict enforcement of okay, and insert new words, support and promote enforcement of current riparian vegetation and stream protection standards in the, and then we leave in Oregon Forest Practices Act to protect riparian vegetation along Class 1 streams and lakes and Class 2 streams and affecting Class 1 streams. That all stays in. And then add, new sentence.
Okay.
The county shall seek changes to the Forest Practices Act when necessary to better protect riparian vegetation and water quality.
On that last bit, I guess, because like the county doesn't have any like actual authority to change the Forest Practice Act, I'm just wondering like how that would be enforceable, or what the goal of seeking changes to it would be. Like, what would that actually look like? I just am like curious about your what you were thinking with that one, Cheryl.
Yeah, and you're right that the county does not have any sway over Forest Practices Act. It is what it is. So this one says shall seek changes to, and the way that procedure works now, and Jed can jump in here because he knows it by heart and I just understand, you know, big picture lay stuff, is that there's a statewide committee that works on Forest Practices Act, but it's made up of citizens. And in the past, Clatsop County commissioners have testified to them. Lots of Clatsop County residents have testified to them. So the county as individuals and the county collectively have suggested changes to Forest Practices Act. So it would be working through that process, and Gail may have things to add, Jed may have things to add. So that's my lay thoughts on that.
Okay,
I guess
I have nothing to add.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I was just curious, like what, I guess like the goal of that sentence is ultimately like is it just to like make sure or encourage that the county be an active participant and use its voice? Like, I just am trying to like figure out what the like goal, the yeah. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
No, I like both of those phrases, that the county be an active participant and that the county use its voice. I think both of those, yeah, are exactly right. And that concept that we're working from, that the land use plan is an aspirational document. So we can't say the county should, but we say, you know, so it's sort of aspirational that if the Forest Practices Act, if we didn't think that it was protecting the riparian areas, then we would encourage the county to be, you know, positive and proactive in doing what changes they thought would help us protect the riparian better.
Cheryl, did you want to add in the name of that committee, which I'm trying to look up? But there is a specific committee that is charged with working with citizens and local governments to review and make potential recommended changes to the Forest Practices Act. But, so do you want to spell that out for clarity?
My 2 cents would be like, maybe don't get too specific and stay broader, just because, you know, like we want it to be as useful of a, I don't know. Maybe that's too, I don't know. Sorry, like I said, I'm coming off like a 4-day Zoom conference, so I feel like my mind isn't working super sharp.
Yeah, so I think I pulled up the right side. There is a very specific committee and it's already named in the comp plan. I think we looked at it last month, and I just lost my train of thought. But they are specifically called out, and that is their task in life, is to work with different to work on changes to the Forest Practices Act. So rather than, I think the wording that we have now, because there is a process and a group that is set up to handle this, I think that by saying the county shall seek changes, it almost makes it seem like we're just unilaterally going to go out and seek changes. Whereas I think if we're working within the prescribed process that's set up, that might be a little more palatable to
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Gail, because otherwise, yeah, it does kind of seem like we're asserting that we have authority over the Forest Practices Act, which I think is not accurate. But yeah, if there is a prescribed method for seeking changes, that I think would be good to note.
I actually agree with Kelly that I don't think that we need to make it too specific or too narrow. And again, always just remembering the process. You know, we're one group that's submitting, and then it still has to go through the countywide group. So I feel like the countywide group could refer us to that one specific committee if they wanted to.
Okay, that sounds fine. Okay, I'm sorry, Cheryl. Can you tell me again all of the policies? I'll write them down this time. I thought I would remember the ones that you wanted to look at. It was it policy 5 next?
Policy 3 and policy 12 are the only other ones I wanted to look at.
Okay, Cheryl, you had also mentioned policy 4. Did that sort of get covered with your changes for policy 3?
No, thank you. My error. I'm trying to read my scribbly notes. Policy 4 and policy 12 are the ones I wanted to look at. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I thought there were 3. Okay, so have we finished policy 3? Are there any other edits we want to make to that, Kelly? Or any comments from other people that are joining the meeting? Okay.
And I think we need to vote or a consensus if we want to send this to the countywide one as representative of the Northeast group.
Yeah, I'm definitely fine with all of those changes, sending those along. Kelly?
Yep. That's good for me.
Great. Okay. So policy 4, to protect riparian vegetation along streams and lakes not covered by the Forest Practices Act, the county shall require a setback for non-water dependent uses. Okay. And then tell us what you got, Cheryl.
Okay, and then there is a staff recommendation in here. So mine is adding words this time, and this one is not so long. So Gail, if you want to try and just type them in as I say them.
I'm ready.
Okay, and so these are new words. So this will go in front of the words that are already there. Existing riparian vegetation. Along streams and lakes. Not subject to Forest Practices Act. Should be maintained to the greatest extent feasible. To provide fisheries and wildlife habitat. Comma, minimize erosion and scouring. Comma, retard water velocities and suppress water temperatures. And then keep the wording that's there, to protect riparian vegetation. Along streams and lakes not covered by Forest Practices Act, county shall require a setback for non-water dependent uses. And then adding words of no less than 50 feet or as determined by best available ecological practices. And that's it.
Okay. Do you want me or do you want to just read the whole thing now? I think maybe, yeah, just read it once through so we hear it as one unit, Cheryl?
Oh yeah, not chopped up in pieces, yeah, okay. Existing riparian vegetation along streams and lakes not subject to the Forest Practices Act should be maintained to the greatest extent feasible to provide fisheries and wildlife habitat, minimize erosion and scouring, retard water velocities, and suppress water temperatures. To protect riparian vegetation along streams and lakes not covered by Forest Practices Act, the county shall require a setback for non-water dependent use of no less than 50 feet or as determined by the best available ecological practices.
Yeah, go for it, Kelly.
I think that was Gail that was gonna
Oh.
talk.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just curious, Cheryl, where you got the 50 feet, like how you chose that number?
it's sort of the minimum that shows up in those other charts.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
it's sort of the lowest number that shows up anywhere.
Gail, did you have something to say?
I had a question for Cheryl. So if on your last portion of the sentence you put together, it says no less than 50 feet or as determined by best ecological practices. So what if the best ecological practice comes in and says, I only need a 20-foot buffer?
Yeah, good question. Suggestions for fixing that?
I guess
And
I
again,
don't, Gail, maybe I don't understand the problem, because it says of no less than 50 feet or as determined by best available ecological practices. So that doesn't the or cover that scenario? So if 20 feet, it's like it's 50 feet or what's best. So if 20 feet is best, then that's fine. I don't know. It seems grammatically to make sense to me, but
Yeah, so I guess the question is really for Cheryl. What is her intent with that? Is her intent to capture a lesser buffer if that's the best science and what is really all that's required, or what does she want to get out of that? Because you're putting things in the code that we as staff are going to have to enforce, and to me, if I read no less than 50 feet, that means that's the absolute minimum. You know, your ecological practices may come in with greater buffers, but to me, no less than 50 feet means no less than 50 feet. So
yeah, and
if her intent is to capture that she does not want a buffer less than 50 feet, period, then that's not reflected in that.
sorry, I just need to grab my charge cable real quick. So you can think about your answer, Cheryl. I'll just be 1 second.
I just hopped on the call. Jen's here. I just wanted to say hi to everybody. Sorry to be late.
Jen, just to bring you up to date, we're going through the ones that we wanted to pull, and we looked at policy 3, and right now we're on policy 4.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'm back. And Cheryl, so yeah, so what is your intent? Is it 50 or more if that is ecologically what's necessary, or is it 50 or what's ecologically necessary, which could be less or more?
I think what is ecologically necessary. And again, you know, we're one group and the other groups are going to put it in, and then it's going to fold into the county too. So thank you for spending time figuring out what my intent was, but I'm okay to not wordsmith it too much. So
it sounds like we could fix that by just taking out the of no less than before 50 feet. So it could just say uses, so it would be.
I think that's a good fix. Yeah. So it would be water dependent uses of 50 feet or as determined by the best available ecological practices.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good fix.
Is it all right if I ask a question here, or would you guys prefer that I wait till the end?
That's fine with me. Jump on in.
Cheryl, is this proposed policy meant to apply to development only, or just a broad rule? Because lakes and streams not covered by the Forest Practices Act could potentially be a pretty broad category. I'm thinking particularly of agricultural users or landowners, but I could also see some other non-fish bearing streams that wouldn't be covered in the Forest Practices Act, that you'd then be putting, 100-foot no use buffers on if you're counting both sides of the stream.
Yeah, good question. For development, yeah, those of us who are hanging out in Clatsop County where there are streams everywhere all the time, yeah, we can't be applying that to everybody everywhere all the time. Development. Thank you.
Okay, so Cheryl, do you want to change non-water dependent uses, which we do have a definition for in our code? Did you want to change that to say development specifically, no non-water dependent development, or are you happy with that? I don't think that our water dependent definition includes agriculture. Hold on a sec here.
Yeah, and Gail, I'm comfortable with replacing uses with development. And again, I don't want to get bogged down too much in wordsmithing.
Okay, I just want to make sure here. And of course I can't find it. So anyway, I'll look for it, but anyway, we can come.
Okay.
Carry on. Sorry.
So did you want to make that change, Cheryl? Or
Yeah,
so from uses to development?
correct. Good.
Okay. So are we ready to move on to policy 12, or does anyone else have any other comments or suggestions for policy 4?
Did you want the definition for water dependent?
Julia, do you have it at hand there? Is it close and you could read it to us quickly?
I just have it at hand. Water dependent is a use or use and activity which can only be carried out on, in, or adjacent to water areas because the use requires access to the water body for waterborne transportation, recreation, energy production, or source of water.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Julia.
And sorry, Jen, were there any policies that you wanted to make notes or changes to?
Not in this, not until 11. Or I had a question about 11.
Okay, great. Then we will do that one next. So what is, or I'll just read it first. The county will require that any additional rural residential development at River Ranch be clustered on the more northerly portion of the site. The county will implement other measures recommended to it by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for minimizing the impact of additional rural residential development on Columbian white-tailed deer.
So I didn't know what River Ranch was, and I Googled it, and there's like a little housing, like a homeowners association in Westport. Is that what this is referring to?
Yeah, it's actually north and east of Westport. I guess slightly east of Westport.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's right on the Columbia, and you actually access it through Columbia County.
Oh, okay. Is this still relevant?
Yeah, so Julia had made a note in here that most of the southern portion of that subdivision is now zoned for open space, parks, and recreation. And there's about 36 acres that remain in the RA1 zoning, but that have not been developed yet. So we do see infill development there. In fact, I'm working on a permit right now for a new house. So it's actually right there. Yeah, so we have an infill house coming in here. So I mean, there's still some applicability for it, but it looks like the major concern was addressed by making sure that that was zoned OPR, open space, parks, and recreation. So, but all of this could be developed yet.
Gail, could you put on the wetland overlay?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is actually the whitetail habitat right there. They like wetlands. So anything that occurs in there, I suspect, is going to require notification of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife at the very least.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's ever had a subdivision plat on it. So they would have to come in for additional approvals, it looks like, if they were going to come in and subdivide it further.
So yeah, my question was just if we needed to keep that extra policy in there for that specific development site, or if it was kind of already covered under the other policies in the plan.
Yeah, what you might want to consider is pulling it out of the main comprehensive plan and putting it specifically maybe in the Northeast plan.
Right. That would make sense to me.
I would support that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think that also makes sense.
I'm on board.
Okay. Great. And we ready to jump into policy 12? So Clatsop County shall rely upon the Forest Practices Act and any supplemental agreements between Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Board of Forestry to protect critical wildlife habitat sites. Cheryl, do you want to?
Yeah, so Gail, this is for the most part will just be a little bit of additional language, so I think I can read it and we can hang in there together. So Clatsop County, and then omit shall rely upon the, okay, and insert support and promote the, and then it remains Forest Practices Act and any supplemental agreements between the Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Board of Forestry. Additional wording, to the extent such measures are ecologically effective methods to, and then it remains the same, protect critical wildlife habitat sites, and an additional sentence, the county shall seek changes to the Forest Practices Act when necessary to better protect critical wildlife habitat sites. And that's it.
I think we still need the first shall for the sentence to still read correctly. Or some
Good
other
catch,
verb.
yes. Sometimes I can't, I've scribbled over them so many times. Sometimes I either make mistakes or I can't read my own scribbling.
Well, thanks for putting some thought into that policy, Cheryl. I really like how you have suggested to change it.
Yeah, I also really like those changes. So, do we have any other comments or changes that we want to include on this policy 12? Okay. Gail, can you tell me what was the next thing we wanted to spend time on in this meeting?
Okay, so if we can just do a motion then to approve table 1 as it's been amended, and then we'll be done with table 1.
Okay. I move that we approve table 1 as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
I can,
Okay. And if anyone is opposed, raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll assume that you are in favor. Okay, looks like everybody's in favor. Thank you. So then we just need to move on to table 2, which is basically the same, but just with the policies specific to the Northeast plan. So again, I would ask if anybody had any specific policies they wanted to pull for further discussion or amendment.
Gail, I have a sort of an overall big picture question. A lot of these seemed to me like they should probably be in the county-wide one and are not specific to the Northeast. And so I was wondering why they were in the Northeast. My scribbled notes, scenic and natural areas policies, policy 2, the fish and wildlife policies, policies 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those all seem to me to be not specific to the Northeast, but again, could probably go into the county-wide one.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point.
I wrote the same notes. I wrote the same note, so we're still under fish and wildlife policies, policies 7, 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, should it be added to the countywide comprehensive plan? I didn't see that they were specific to the Northeast.
Okay, I think that's a good point, Cheryl. I don't know if what the other committee members think.
Yeah, I agree. Reading them, a lot of them seemed a lot broader than the Northeast. And so either adopting those on as possible amendments to the overall, or yeah, kind of keeping the Northeast more specific as a drill down.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see, it seems like if the point is to have one document that applies to the whole county versus one document that applies very specific here, it should be, the second one should be only in relation to, very specific pieces of property that are, in our territory.
Okay,
Gail,
so
I had
Cheryl,
one. Gail, I had one more. I'm sifting through all of my pages here. The very last one under community development - conservation forest policy 1. My notes also say, could that be added to the county-wide one?
yeah, I do not see why that could not be. And let me go back up here. And then which, was it all of the fish and wildlife policies except for
There were a
5?
couple that were specific, the hatchery one, and
Right, so we could do 1, 2, 3, probably 4, 5, and 6 are specific to the Northeast.
Correct.
Okay.
And then 7 through 10, the county. Yeah, and then 11 and 12 seem to be more specific locally.
Okay. Okay, I think I got that. Okay, were there any other policies or items that the committee members wanted to pull for discussion?
I had a question about, am I muted? No, I'm not. About the policies 2 and 4 under Ivy Station to the mouth of Blind Slough, towards the beginning. And there's notes that these are North Coast Land Conservancy owned or adjacent properties. And I was just wondering if anybody had consulted with NCLC, like if these are still appropriate to keep in, like the one I was talking about, maybe building a residence. I was just wondering if NCLC had looked at this part.
That's a good question, and I don't believe that they have. I know I hadn't reached out to them yet about this, so I will make a note to do that.
Great, thank you.
Actually, Jen, I had a similar note on mine. If we should check with Nature Conservancy.
Did you have something, Jed?
I was going to offer to Gail that if she wants some of the backstory on that parcel, I may have some. It's probably a little bit of a rabbit hole to go down here in the meeting to use up the whole committee's time, but I'm happy to talk to you about it, Gail, if you want to hear it.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yep. So I will get with you to make sure that I get the backstory.
Jed, is it possible to give us a brief one? I'm curious. But again, I'm always respectful of not going down rabbit holes or using up time, so your call.
Yeah, well, I can probably do it real quick. That Blind Slough was owned by Boise Cascade when this was written. Later sold to Hampton, who immediately donated it or quickly donated it to the Nature Conservancy. The residence is kind of, the way it's worded is kind of strange. South of Blind Slough, I think this policy might be in two separate parts of the document, but just south of Blind Slough, that property is the Big Creek Lodge, where there is some development, but it mentions higher ground near the railroad, which doesn't, the railroad runs directly along the Columbia River. I suspect when this was written, since Boise Cascade owned all of that, they were retaining the rights to develop a residence where there's an old homestead to the north, just northwest of the Blind Slough property. And that's now Hampton-owned land. So I don't know what the thinking was at the time, what Boise Cascade was thinking. Maybe they were planning the land donation and they thought that a caretaker's residence would be useful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Jed.
I apologize, and I may be a little bit confused because I've also seen two different things referred to as Blind Slough. The area that we're looking at on the county map now, and then the area that's directly at the mouth of Big Creek and Little Creek.
So this is the end of Big Creek here.
Yeah, so I've seen that property referred to as Blind Slough in the past, and maybe I'm just mixed up, or there's some local nomenclature that's crossing over.
Okay, well, I'll still reach out to North Coast Land Conservancy and see if they have any history on it as well. So Jed, based on what you just told us is what you understand for the history, do you think that the policies are still relevant in the comp plan or the community plan right now?
The specific call out for a caretaker residence would be a strange arrangement if it's referring to the portion of land that I think it is, because it would be a NCLC residence on another landowner's property. The policy for this referencing a log storage yard and transport, the only reason I could see anyone wanting to use those kind of peripheral Forest Practice Act allowed activities would be if the railroad, they're always saying they want to get it up and running again. I don't know if that could ever actually happen, but there would be potential to, really decrease truck usage. So it might be beneficial to the county to leave that sort of thing in there, just, to take possibly, if the railroad ever ran again, to allow access to those rail cars.
Okay, what do the committee members think?
My knowledge of the Blind Slough, that area that now belongs to the Nature Conservancy, I think what I know of, I think we can eliminate both policy 3 and 4. Yeah, I don't think a caretaker is realistic, and logging in the swamp is not realistic either. These are such old policies now.
Yeah, I think it's very unlikely the railroad is coming back, is my understanding of that.
I would just say, like, if you're to maybe just double check with NCLC, but that leading towards, yeah, just not like taking them out would be fine with me as well.
Yeah.
And Kelly, if I can have 1 minute to just make a side comment here while we're on Ivy Station to the mouth of Blind Slough, policy 1 talks about the Big Creek spruce swamp, and I always go berserk when people are taking us down rabbit holes or telling history or going too far astray, but I'm going to take 2 minutes into history. I originally worked on this land use plan, whatever it was, 40 years ago. And in those days, there was a wonderful logger slash conservationist who lived in Napa called Cupie Zeke. And most of you are too young to even know him. But when I first started working on this, he came and got Ted and I and took us around and started showing us special places, things that he knew from growing up, things that he knew from working in the woods, things that he knew from his passion for wildlife. And this Big Creek spruce swamp is one of the places that he took us to. And we stood there by Napa Docks and looked at it. And he said, that is, among other things, a heron rookery. And then he just talked to us about that piece of property. So again, for those of you who are young, 40 years later, I probably wrote the wording on this particular thing, and here it is, still in there, still being protected. So all of our work is not in vain. Sometimes it comes around.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's really cool.
Okay, were there any other policies that we want to pull for discussion from the community plan? Okay, hearing none, would somebody like to make a motion to accept table 2 as amended?
I can move to accept table 2 as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, is anyone opposed? Raise your hand, please. Okay, seeing none, we are ready to move on to what I consider to be the fun stuff. So table 3 is really looking forward for the next 20 years. Whoops. Trying to identify the issues that we see, even if we can't see the table, the issues that will be affecting wildlife habitat or potentially impacting it. Again, not to draft the policies, but to identify the issues and what we want to accomplish. So I'll open up discussion. Okay, it's Better Been Technology Day. So to help with the discussion, staff had put in a couple of recommendations for some things that we knew or had identified. One of them, which is not particular to the Northeast area, but will impact the Clatsop Plains area in particular, is that we have been working on this elk solution, elk project with Oregon Solutions. And so what that will culminate in is a declaration of cooperation, which will spell out certain responsibilities that the county has, the jurisdictions have, and various agencies have. So we felt as an example that including, so the issue would be we know we have this elk project that's out there, and we're going to have to work with it and follow through on our commitments. And so we put in some draft language for that. We had some other staff who had made a recommendation that there are many other zones that aren't classified as state resource zones that do have features that would promote or sustain wildlife, such as streams or wetlands. Areas, for example, that may not be identified as major or peripheral big game right now, but have that potential to support game habitat. And so there was also a recommendation that the county shall add language to Goal 5 that would allow projects for restoration and enhancement of fish and wildlife habitat to be added as permitted and conditional uses in all zones. That's right. Yeah. So what we were trying to accomplish, basically, there are some zones where we spell out habitat restoration as a use that people can do there, either permitted or conditional. In other zones, we don't even address it at all. And so therefore it's assumed to be prohibited, even though there might be land that would be a good candidate for restoration. So making that change to allow restoration activities in any zone would just seem to make common sense. Another issue that
I
staff
love that,
identified.
Gail.
Oh, good.
I love that one. And I also like the similar one across, which is the similar thing with the restoration enhancement of fish and wildlife habitat to be added to conditional use. Like, and those two, add them in.
Yep, those were our planning director's, Julia's recommendations. So all kudos to her on that one. So anyway, so that's kind of what we want to do with this table 3 worksheet. So if you have some issues that you really want to talk about today, is this the opportunity?
That first one about Oregon solutions, I support that one. And that next one that we just talked about, my notes say excellent. So I'm with you all on that one, at an exclamation point at the end of it. One that did not make it in here yet that I scribbled down, the need to address adverse effects of climate change to fish and wildlife habitat areas, especially with respect to water resources. And so that's just a concept. I don't have any wording on that one.
Okay, that almost sounds like more of a goal type of language, because that's a big one. So.
Yeah, to address climate change is, yeah, always a big one.
Because I think, some of the policies that we've looked at and some of the changes that you've suggested, Cheryl, and other committees have suggested, are going to be tied in and interwoven with climate change. And so whether it's protection of stream buffers or things like that through the Forest Practices Act, or making sure that on lands that aren't covered by Forest Practices Act that we've got some of that buffer requirement going on. So I think there are specific policies, but I would recommend using that as maybe more of a larger goal.
Yeah, to plop that into the goal category, yeah, is fine with me.
I'll just add support to that. Cheryl's idea.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as the other committee members with these new ones.
And in thinking about land use and climate change, just I don't know if this fits into a different goal altogether, but just thinking about where we're allowing building in a world where we have to expect more wildfires, I don't know, that's probably somewhere else that we should be thinking about that.
Okay. I think a lot of that will get covered in goal 7, Tally. So let me jot it down though for a second.
Remind us what goal 7 is.
Natural hazards mitigation.
Right. Yeah. No. That's
but what I would ask about is, so Clatsop Plains right now, that area is where we've been promoting and pushing a lot of our residential growth. And obviously it's causing conflicts with the wildlife that's out there. Would you foresee that happening, or does it happen now? Maybe not to the same extent, but in the Northeast area, because there's a lot of development going on in Napa and Swenson as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do definitely have elk herds that come through here. And, as there's more development, I imagine there'll be some of the same issues.
Would you see it rising to the level over the next 20 years where we probably want to be proactive about it now and think about it? And would it be that we want to limit it, or how would you see what would you like to see come out of that in terms of balancing natural wildlife habitat, but also having that need for housing?
So is the issue with the plains, my understanding, I went to one of the solutions meetings for the elk, and my understanding is a big part of the problem is the Highway 101, there being accidents because of the elk herds. Are there other issues with the elk besides the collisions?
Yeah, so there's been on the the west side of 101, conflicts where the elk come in and are eating gardens and vegetables. Some people are feeding the elk, which is causing problems.
Right.
There's been incidents where small pets have been attacked, or in the dune areas where the elk have become aggressive, especially during calving season, where they're trying to protect their young, and so they do get aggressive at that point, which is just how they're supposed to react. So there have been a lot of other issues, and as housing continues to go in and people want to water their lawns, and we've got the golf course that's highly irrigated, where that area used to dry out a lot during the summer months, it's now irrigated, and so that's creating forage for the elk, and so they tend to stay more on the west side of 101 than they ever did when our plan was drafted 40 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine all of those same issues will continue to be exacerbated here. We have, we have elk as well, and we have all of those same conditions.
Do you see a lot of people, a lot of incidences of people irrigating their lawns, or because I see it as very different than Clouds and Plains.
No, people mow their lawns a lot.
So much.
But yeah, no, I don't actually see people irrigating their lawns.
No, I don't see anybody doing that either.
I've seen it around a little bit. I think it's just, I think the amount of space we have compared to like the amount of lawns being watered is a lot lower, like the percentage is lower. What you're talking about, Gail, is making me think about some of those, the language in some of those earlier policies that were talking about those zoned areas, that the zoning we have doesn't, like, we don't have those. It was like I can't remember. Sorry, I don't have it up with me, but just the idea of clustering development and leaving like more corridor space. There was some language around that in some of those policies that were talking about like I can't remember what the zone was, but like the 80-acre lot parcels. Just with elk specifically having that kind of concept of corridors and throughways that, and I don't know what that means, like as far as like actual zoning and development, but like some kind of, I think that like that would be something to kind of address some of those, because even on like a really small scale, just on our property, like we grow vegetables, we have to keep the elk out, but I didn't put like fencing all across our property because the elk would just bust through it, and like they don't care about fences. So I created an island where they could go around it, and just those kinds of concepts that are like the elk also deserve to be here. And this, like, I don't know how that would be worded to kind of like work with natural flows or like creating corridors or something like that. If that makes any sense. I don't know, I'm babbling now.
Yep, no, you're exactly correct. And they're talking about the same thing in Clouds and Plains, about identifying where those migration corridors are, and then making sure that when we do have subdivisions coming in, that they have to have 30% open space and cluster, but making sure that the 30% open space that we're getting is actually what we need, that it's got forage and habitat for the wildlife, and it's actually an area that they're going to use. So yeah, I completely get what you're saying, and you're right on. So
yeah, and I like that addition of adding the language of making it not just like land that is set aside, but that it has to be like usable to the elk. Like it needs to be something that they would want to move through. You know, they're not going to want to like that they will have, you know, what they need, and it would be like accessible and not just like quote unquote, like you said, like a 30%, like could mean potentially anything. And
yeah, I don't know if this is something we can include in the language as well, but that I think a big part of the problem with these subdivisions and people and tourists is just a lack of education around how to interact with wildlife, and that is causing the domestication and some of the bad behavior from just like that people feel like comfortable getting so close to elk that are wild animals that want to protect their young. So I don't know how we can encourage in our land use or planning, just like discourage people from trying to interact with wildlife.
Yeah, so I think that's another good point too, Tally. And I think we could put in just an aspirational goal about education. And I know for the plan that Oregon Solutions is working on, they're looking not only at tourists, but having a kind of a more detailed, specified, tailored, that's the word I'm looking for, tailored program for residents, and then even looking at school age kids. So starting in the younger grades to let kids understand, here's why the elk are here. Yeah, they look nice, but you don't want to get too close. Here's why. So yeah, different education programs. It's
Yeah,
not really. Go ahead.
When you buy a house here, they make you read a pamphlet about lead. Like maybe there could also be a pamphlet about wildlife, when you're going to buy a house. So you have to learn about that as well.
Yep. Okay.
And Gail, I think you're right to look forward to these potential conflicts with the elk. And I'm remembering back, one of the goals that as a county we do want to do is to increase affordable housing. And we in the Northeast had talked about, looking at clustering and changing the zoning so that there can be duplexes, triplexes, so that we can open up and expand some areas for affordable housing. That is a goal. And then that runs into development in elk. So you're right. We need to balance those two. And right now we're sort of focused on the elk, but we do need to remember back that one of our goals is to increase affordable housing. This concept of corridors, yeah, that we not just randomly set aside chunks of land, but that that it fit their natural migration, that it makes sense.
Okay, that was a good discussion. I enjoyed that. What other issues can we identify that might come up over the next 20 years that aren't already in our plan?
These are, you just mean specifically for this goal, or do you mean in general?
We could go in general if you've got some things that are in your heads right now. We're focused on wildlife habitat, but we can talk about it.
No, that's fine. I was just wanting clarification.
Okay. Yeah, and if we don't have anything more for tonight, that's fine as well. You can always send me thoughts if something comes up after the meeting and you think, oh yeah, I wish I had brought that up. Let us know, because this is not the one and only time that you'll ever be talking or looking at this. So.
Mm-hmm. No, you can't be on the video.
Okay. Well, if anything comes up, you can let us know. But it kind of sounds like we covered what we wanted to cover this evening. So put it back, Jennifer. I guess you're actually in charge if Tally wants to turn over control, or she wants to hold on to it. I don't know.
I am happy to turn over control.
No power dynamics here, you guys.
Can I add one quick thing real quick? As far as like goals versus policies, and can we go back to, because so we had mostly policies, and then there was the goal that Cheryl kind of wrote in. We can go back to that. I'm also just thinking of in other goal sections, we've had a statement that kind of talked more broadly about, I mean, it basically was more of a goal of like that the county values protecting its, fish and wildlife habitat, and like maybe like maintaining numbers, or something a little bit more like a value statement, broad in this category. I don't know if that's something that we need, but it's definitely something that isn't necessary. It's it's implied by all these policies, but it isn't an explicit goal.
All right, so I think Cheryl, maybe you can remind me, did we put one in at the very beginning of goal 5 when we first started talking about it? Did we have a overarching goal? If not, I'll make a note to add that in here. Because I think that's what you're talking about, Kelly, something that sort of encompasses all these different resources that we've been talking about and stresses the value and the importance of all of them to the county.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly all of the goal 5 that we've gone through, but even if we wanted to be more specific about wildlife habitat, having a more of a statement that the county wants to protect, our wildlife populations, the fish and wildlife habitat, that's the purpose of all of these, a more blatantly stated purpose of all of these policies is basically what I'm asking for. But again, I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, so not tied specifically just to the protection of riparian vegetation, that we're looking at all the different wildlife species and their habitats, and that they're all equally important.
Correct, or that they have like inherent like worth and dignity to be here, and that we value that as like part of our larger, county goal. The reason that popped into my head is because the bald eagle one like specifically was like, because it's a symbol of freedom, and I was like, well, maybe it's because it's a bald eagle, and that is like should be here in and of its own right, like regardless of the national, like just something a little bit more like broad.
Okay.
And Gail, just to answer your question, I do not remember what we wrote back at the beginning of goal 5, and I have not been on a 4-day workshop for Zoom, so
Yeah, it's a lot. So actually I'm going to go into a side note here. So I was talking to staff today about the process, and it is long, it is cumbersome. So I'm just going to toss this out just to see what your reaction is, probably because it's 5:29 and I'm tired and I'm giddy. But we were thinking that if we pulled all the rest of the existing policies, put them into one giant worksheet for everything for the remaining goals that we got, gave the committees 2 months off with the only homework assignment of checking a column. Do you agree with the staff recommendation? No, you don't agree with the staff recommendation, or pull it for further discussion. If we sent out a worksheet that had all the rest of the policies that exist in the comp plan right now, gave the committees 2 months to work on it and just check the boxes and return it, what would you guys think about that? Then we would spend the remainder of a reduced period of time after that just really focusing on the next 20 years and trying to identify those issues. What do you guys think about that?
That sounds amazing.
Sounds like a great idea.
Are you saying that for the entire plan or the rest of the goal?
The entire plan. So take what's left of goal 5 and everything through goal 19 and put it all into one worksheet and just give you a column, either agree with staff recommendation or pull for further discussion. You just send those back to us within a 2-month period. If you don't send it back, we're going to assume, this was Julia's idea, and it's brilliant. We're going to assume that you have 100% agreement with staff and our recommendations. So there's a default option. But really, I think we're just getting too much bogged down in this 40 years ago. Let's look at what happened. And it's important, but I really want us to focus on the next 20 years. That's what we want. So I'm thinking we could shave off a lot of time, give all the committee members a little break for a couple months with just one assignment of yes or pull it. So does it sound like it might work?
Yeah, I'm for it.
That's great.
Okay.
I'm for it. I would really appreciate some like reminders or something, like even just like one sentence, like you should have been through most of the policies by now, don't forget. Because like the thing I do like about these like more timed ones is I have to remember, and it is a like stated section, and if it's this is like a total personal thing, but if I'm given the whole thing, I might like forget the time and like, you know, wait. So maybe it could be like, even if it's just one sentence reminders from you, Gail, every 2 weeks, like you should have gotten through a couple more policies or a couple more goals just to like cheerlead us a little bit. I would be able to say, yes, I can do it.
Okay. I can certainly commit to that. And what I'm wondering is, can we set up maybe like, you know, the United Way where they used to have the temperature thing where they, as they raise money, it would color up. So maybe everybody could have their own little thing and then color up the bars as you go through the goals. But okay, I just wanted to throw that out there. It had nothing to do with today's meeting, but I was just thinking about it. So anyway.
And actually, Gail, I have a different take on it. So for me, that would be a no-go. And I'm one of the people who's fussing about how long the process is taking and how many meetings there are. But a couple of things. One is, at least for me, my brain works well to focus on one chunk of information and to really think about it and read it and focus on it and then come and discuss it and then do another chunk. To just sort of hand me goals 6 through 19 and say goodbye and good luck. So one is I do better when we're in chunks. The other thing is I also do better by hearing the ideas. Sorry. That was Dirk Rohn. I also benefit from hearing the discussions from the other people, both in our Northeast one and in the county-wide one. I have always felt strongly that 2 brains are better than 1 and 4 brains are better than 1. I like group process. And goal number 1 is citizen involvement. And I know the process is slow and bogged down, and I'm one of the people who's been fussing about it the most, but I like the public involvement. I like us discussing together, and I like us doing them in chunks. So there's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Go ahead, Kelly.
My other thought on that is just that I would still appreciate the like the background, as you know how you usually give us some kind of little summary or like the quick reading materials for each goal. That part would still be useful. Yeah, I mean, even if you gave it to us all in one chunk.
Okay, no, that's good to know too. Okay, yeah. As I said, it was just something we kind of came up with in the office today, and I figured since I had a captive audience, I'd throw it out there for some thoughts. We haven't talked about this to any of the other CACs yet, so but we'll chew on it a little bit more. But okay, all right, that's my 2 cents. So I guess let's go back to the agenda. So I guess if there's no additional thoughts about the 3 tables, and I guess we're back to public comment. Jennifer.
Is there any public comment? Okay, then I think our meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for being here today. Sorry I was late.
No worries, glad you made it. So,
Yeah.
all right, thank
And
you.
I'm glad the technology decided to work. I was prepped for this meeting and I thought, oh, to put it off for a week or something, then I have to remember all of this stuff again.
Yep. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night.